Money doesn't buy peace, but it can buy a very specific kind of revenge, the kind that makes silence feel like a throne. I learned that lesson 3 weeks ago when my own family tried to dismantle my career, completely unaware that they were aiming their weapons at the majority shareholder of their own employer. My name is Evelyn. In the polished, high-stakes corridors of climate tech, I am known simply as A-Lyn. I chose the name to be deliberately vague, a ghost in the machine. Officially, my title is Chief Innovation Officer at Skyvera Labs in Austin, Texas. But what my parents and my sister Jasmine didn't know, what they couldn't possibly fathom, was that as of this spring, I had quietly become the firm's majority owner. I didn't do it with a lottery win or a lucky break. I did it through a multi-layered investment arm I'd been building since my sophomore year of college. The cracks in our family foundation started 16 years ago. While Jasmine, my older sister, was the golden child of our suburban household, I was the shadow. I was a first-generation college kid, coding through the night in a cramped NYU dorm that smelled of stale coffee and desperation. I was double majoring in environmental science and computer engineering, working 3 jobs just to keep my laptop running. Meanwhile, Jasmine was the family's pride. She dropped out of business school 3 times, bouncing from one network marketing scheme to another. Every time she failed, my dad would adjust his glasses and say, "She's just finding her path, Ava. You've always been the stable one." Stable was code for ignored. While I waited tables and built green tech software prototypes from scratch in the basement of a public library, Jasmine went backpacking through Bali to reset her mindset. I stayed quiet. I stayed focused. I knew that while she was chasing the spotlight, I was building a stage. By the time I was 32, I had launched and sold 3 startups. I filtered my earnings through blind trusts and offshore entities, not to hide from the law, but to hide from the people who shared my DNA. I knew that if they knew I had a cent, they wouldn't celebrate, they would demand. The illusion of my struggle was my greatest defense. When I joined Skyvera Labs 14 months ago, I let them think I was just a mid-level hire. I let them believe I was lucky to have a stable paycheck. This spring, I executed my masterstroke. Using Verdant Core Holdings, a shell company with 0 public links to my name, I acquired a controlling interest in Skyvera. The firm was undervalued, a hidden gem loaded with untapped potential. When the board promoted me to Chief Innovation Officer, they thought they were appointing a brilliant, obedient strategist. They had no idea they were handing the title to their new boss. Jasmine's reaction at Sunday dinner was the first hint of the storm. She sat across from me, swirling a glass of expensive wine my mother had bought to celebrate Jasmine's new lead at a sales firm. "Must be nice to catch a lucky break, Ava," Jasmine smirked, her voice a honey-coated dagger. "Just don't let it go to your head. Running a department isn't like building little science apps in your bedroom. It requires charisma." My dad gave a tight, supportive smile to Jasmine. My mom, never missing a beat, added, "Maybe Jasmine can give you some pointers, Ava. She's led sales teams for 3 major companies now. She understands the real corporate world." I took a slow sip of my tea, feeling the weight of the acquisition agreement sitting in my encrypted safe at home. "I'll definitely consider that," I replied, my voice as smooth as glass. I watched Jasmine's eyes narrow. She couldn't stand it. For 30 years, she had been the spotlight child. She was the one with the real job, the loud presence, the one who took up all the air in the room. I was just the quiet one with too many degrees and too little visibility. She didn't just want me to fail, she felt it was her cosmic duty to put me back in the basement where she felt I belonged. Jasmine's campaign began with a smile. She started showing up at Skyvera under the guise of sisterly support. She would bring lunch for my department heads, masking her predatory intent with expensive salads and performative laughter. From my second-floor glass office, I watched her lean in close to the senior staff. I knew exactly what she was saying. She was planting seeds. "Ava is under so much pressure," she would whisper. "She's still learning the ropes. We're all a bit worried she's out of her depth." Then came the anonymous reports. HR began flagging complaints questioning my qualifications. There were allegations of fake credentials and mysteriously missing coursework from my NYU days. It was all fiction, easily dismissed by anyone who bothered to check, but the intent was a loud, clanging alarm. When I finally confronted her, Jasmine didn't even blink. "I'm only looking out for you, Ava," she purred, leaning against the doorframe of my office. "You know how it is. These companies love promoting women fast to hit quotas. I'd hate to see you fall apart in front of the board." I let her keep going. I wanted to see exactly how far she would push the knife. The answer came yesterday in the form of a sleek, black folder delivered to the board of directors. It was a masterpiece of forgery, bank records, fake emails, and a fabricated timeline claiming I was involved in embezzlement and insider trading. It was so well constructed that the board called for an emergency meeting for Monday morning. Jasmine was practically glowing at dinner last night. She had heard from her sales grapevine that the board wanted her present as a character witness or consultant. "The board wants me there tomorrow," she said, her eyes gleaming with a manic triumph. "Sounds like there's going to be a big shake-up at the top. It's for the best, really." My mom clapped her hands in excitement. My dad raised a glass. Neither of them bothered to ask why I hadn't been invited to a meeting about my own career. They were already mourning my job while celebrating Jasmine's rise. But while they were dreaming of my downfall, I was in my home office, surrounded by the true architecture of Sky Vera Labs. I had spent the night documenting every whisper, every forged document, and every IP address Jasmine had used to send those anonymous reports. Monday morning, 8:45 a.m. The air in the Sky Vera lobby was crisp, smelling of expensive floor wax and tension. Jasmine swept in like a queen approaching her coronation, flanked by our parents. She wore a sharp, navy power suit, radiating the kind of victory that only comes from thinking you've successfully destroyed someone. "Is the board ready for us?" she asked the receptionist, her voice loud enough to echo. From the second floor, I watched them. I watched as Elias Romero, our board chair, ushered them into the executive wing. They looked so proud. They looked like they were about to witness a public execution. At exactly 9 o'clock, I stood up, straightened my blazer, and walked toward the boardroom. When I stepped through the door, Elias was mid-sentence. "These allegations against Miss Lynn are extremely serious, Anne." "Apologies for the delay," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a cold front. I walked straight to the head of the table, the seat reserved for the chair, and pulled it out. Jasmine's head snapped up. The smugness on her face didn't just fade, it curdled. "Ava, this is a closed session," she hissed, her voice a sharp whisper. "You weren't invited. This is for the board and qualified consultants." I clasped my hands on the table and smiled. Actually, I invited myself. It's rather difficult to conduct a board meeting without the majority shareholder, don't you think? The silence that followed was so heavy it felt physical. My mother blinked rapidly, looking around the room for someone to tell her it was a joke. My dad froze, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. "What are you talking about?" Jasmine spat, her voice cracking. "Sky Vera is a public entity. It's owned by shareholders." "It was," I said, nodding to my assistant, Mina, who stepped forward with a leather portfolio. "Until 2 months ago, when it was quietly acquired by Verdant Core Holdings. Elias, would you care to show the visitors the ownership breakdown?" As the documents were passed around, I watched the blood drain from Jasmine's face. She wasn't looking at a sister anymore, she was looking at a predator she had tried to hunt, only to realize I owned the forest. "This is a joke," Jasmine stammered, her eyes darting across the pages. "You're just a coder. You're the quiet one. You couldn't pull this off." "I've heard that my whole life," I said. "And I've let you believe it. But silence isn't weakness, Jasmine. It's a strategy." I nodded to Mina, who tapped a command on her tablet. The boardroom's hidden speakers crackled to life. It was Jasmine's voice, clear, sharp, and unmistakable. "She's not cut out for real leadership," the recording whispered. "She's smart, but she crumbles. The board will see that soon." Another clip played. "Honestly, she's only there for the diversity quota. I'm just looking for a way to show them the real Ava." The temperature in the room plummeted. The directors, who had already been briefed by me at midnight, sat like statues. Jasmine was sinking into her chair, her confident posture unraveling like a cheap sweater. I have the envelope you sent, Jasmine, I said, holding up the black folder. Falsified spreadsheets. Forged emails. You really thought I wouldn't track the metadata on the files you created? You really thought the quiet sister wouldn't notice you trying to embezzle my reputation? Ava, surely. My mom started, her voice fragile and high. Surely you aren't going to destroy your sister's life over a little rivalry? Like she tried to destroy mine. I turned to face my mother. You showed up here today to watch me fall. You didn't come to defend me. You came to support the correct daughter. Well, you bet on the wrong one. I turned back to the board. I request the formal dismissal of all allegations. Furthermore, I move for immediate legal action against Jasmine Lin for corporate sabotage and character defamation. And, I paused, looking Jasmine directly in the eye, I am requesting a formal letter be sent to her current employer detailing this misconduct, complete with the audio files of her admitting to the sabotage. Jasmine let out a strangled sob. You'll ruin me. I'll never work in this industry again. The difference between us, Jasmine, I said, my voice razor-sharp, is that I have proof. You had forged spreadsheets and hope. You didn't just come for my job. You came for my life's work. And now, I'm taking your audience away. I stood up, the meeting officially adjourned. Security will escort you out. My parents are banned from the property. Any contact with my staff will result in an immediate restraining order. We're family, my dad yelled, his face turning a deep, angry purple. Family celebrates your wins, I replied, grabbing my coat. Family doesn't try to erase you out of jealousy. I could have bought you that country club membership, Dad. I could have paid for all those vacations you gave Jasmine. I sold my first startup for $50 million when I was 27. But I stayed quiet because I wanted to see who would stand by me when they thought I had nothing. You all failed the test. As security led them toward the elevator, Jasmine turned back one last time. Her face was a ruin of mascara and terror. Please, she whispered. I was just jealous. I couldn't stand that you were finally winning. When you thought I was struggling, you pushed me lower, I said. When I was thriving, I stayed quiet so you wouldn't feel small. That is the difference between us. Goodbye, Jasmine. The weeks that followed were a clean sweep. Jasmine was fired within 48 hours of her company receiving my dossier. My parents left dozens of tearful voicemails, which I archived and never played. I had outgrown the need for their validation. 3 months later, Jasmine showed up at my office. She didn't have the designer bag or the sharp suit. She looked smaller, worn out, wearing a plain blouse and jeans. She placed a manila envelope on my desk. This is everything, she said softly. The passwords, the contacts I used to try and flip your staff. I've already sent the confession to the board. I'm starting over, Ava. Entry level. No titles. I looked at her for a long time. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, professional distance. Why tell me? Because you were right, she said. I wasn't building anything. You were. And I hated myself for not being you. As she turned to leave, I spoke one last word. Jasmine. She stopped, hope flickering in her eyes for a brief, desperate second. Send me your resume in a year. Not for a leadership role. But if you're serious about starting from the ground up, Skyvera always has room for people who are willing to earn their place. She nodded, a single tear tracing its way down her cheek, and left without another word. Today, Skyvera Labs is the leader in climate tech. I sit in my corner office overlooking the Austin skyline, watching the sun dip behind the hills. Success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about finally proving to yourself that you were always right to believe in the girl coding in the dark. If this story stirred something inside you, don't scroll away in silence. Tap like, it tells us these stories deserve to be told. Subscribe to Vengeful Goddess for unforgettable tales of betrayal, resilience, and justice, stories you won't hear anywhere else. Turn on the bell icon, so the next story reaches you the moment it drops. Your support keeps these voices alive. Because sometimes, revenge isn't loud, Being heard is